Is sponsored in part by Customers Bank.
Welcome to the PCN Capital Preview. I'm Francine Schertzer. Today we'll discuss the state budget. But first, we're joined by Danielle Ohl, investigative reporter for Spotlight PA. You wrote that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court last week struck down the mandatory life sentences for second-degree murder convictions as being unconstitutional. What is the classification as second-degree murder, and why would this classification be considered differently when being sentenced?
Sure. So, second degree murder in Pennsylvania, also commonly known as felony murder, is a sentencing kind of scheme that considers the course of a felony that resulted in someone losing their life to be pretty much the same as a killing that was carried out with intention. So if somebody, the classic example is the getaway driver, that, maybe they were intending to commit a robbery, maybe even a violent robbery, but they did not intend to kill anybody. A partner killed somebody, something went wrong. And in the course of committing that felony, someone lost their life. So it is still a serious crime, but the outcome in Pennsylvania has been that folks in some cases are getting sentenced with felonies that are kind of loosely related to another felony that resulted in a killing, but they themselves did not pull the trigger, or they themselves did not have the same involvement that the person who did pull the trigger did, and the outcome is the same. In Pennsylvania, it is mandatory that someone serve life without the possibility of parole. So that is what the Supreme Court looked at under actually the cruel punishment clause in the Pennsylvania Constitution, and found to be unconstitutional.
Can you briefly tell us about the actual case that brought forth this Supreme Court decision?
Yeah, so Derek Lee was in Allegheny County, and he, in the course of a robbery, was violent, pistol whipped somebody, but then left. And after he was absent, the accomplice was kind of scuffling over a gun with the victim in their basement, and it went off. So that is kind of, as I was explaining earlier, he was not himself present. He did not himself pull the trigger, but he was kind of involved in the course of that felony. So he received the same sentence.
What does the General Assembly need to do now procedurally in response to this court decision?
Yeah, so the court was purposefully mum on whether this decision applies retroactively to folks like Mr. Lee, who, were sentenced in the same manner over the course of decades, who are sitting in prison now for this offense, for under this sentencing scheme that's now constitutional. The Supreme Court said, hey, that's a legislative matter. We're going to kick it to you. So, the legislature can act. Governor Shapiro, after the decision came out last week, posted to X saying the legislature should act. There are legislators who have told me that there is the appetite to do so. So really what they could do is take a look at the two laws, one involving actually, the crime, and then one involving the murder, I should say, and one involving the parole aspect of it, and amend those to ensure that people are able to take a second look, the parole board take a second look at the cases of the folks who are currently sitting in prison, of which there are more than 1,000.
What would the long-term impact be if this decision is applied retroactively?
It would be massive. It would be monumental. I mean, there are, like I said, more than 1,000 people who are currently sitting in prison for second degree murder. They are sitting in prison for life without the possibility of parole. So if the legislature acts and somehow makes it so that they can be eligible for parole that they never were. That would take it out of the court system, which would probably be a little bit more procedurally, less burdensome, but it's still massive. It would still require taking a look at 1,000 cases, which, is going to have kind of monumental impact not only on the person sitting in prison, but potentially, the victims of the original crime. So that is kind of the best case scenario outcome. If the legislature doesn't act, it's going to open these cases to appeals. And that would potentially be very burdensome on the trial courts and end up right back at the Supreme Court so that they could answer the question of whether it should be retroactive.
What's the likelihood that the legislature comes to some sort of agreement on this before the 120-day stay imposed by the court runs out?
I mean, it's the legislature, so things are always a little bit up in the air as to whether they can act quickly. But we've seen them act quickly when they want to in the past. So I spoke with Senator Sharif Street of Philadelphia. He was confident that they could get something done. He has a bill currently pending in the Senate that would take a look at that parole eligibility that I was talking about earlier and make it so that folks who are currently incarcerated for second-degree murder would become eligible after, in some cases, 25 years, in some cases 15. And of course, that has to go through, the negotiating process. But it seems like among legislators, there is the appetite to get something done. That is a bipartisan bill with Senator Camera Bartolotta, who is, of her caucus, more criminal justice minded and reform minded. So it seems like, there could be the potential to get something done quickly, but you never know with the legislature.
We've been speaking with Danielle Ohl, investigative reporter with Spotlight PA. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
More of the PCN Capital Preview after this short break.
PCN is the place to follow the 2026 election. Stay informed on the races for governor, lieutenant governor, and key congressional districts. See one-on-one candidate interviews, candidate forums, and more. Available anytime for free with PCN Select. Go to PCNselect.com to start watching today. PCN is Pennsylvania Politics and Policy.
Want to know what's new on your favorite PCN series? Looking to stay up to date with state leadership and government activities? Subscribe to PCN's newsletters and stay informed about everything Pennsylvania. Get exclusive previews, behind-the-scenes insights, and can't-miss recommendations delivered straight to your inbox. Choose the information that's important to you. It's free, it's easy, and it's just a click away. Sign up for your all-access pass to everything Pennsylvania. Visit PCNTV.com to sign up today.
Welcome back. Our guests today are former State Representative and House Appropriations Chair Stan Saylor and former Pennsylvania Lieutenant Governor Mike Stack. Last week, House Democrats introduced a state budget bill mirroring the governor's proposal. Speaker Joanna McClinton said she anticipates an on-time budget. As individuals who are intimately involved in the process, what do you think when you watch what's happening in Harrisburg? Stan, we'll start with you.
Well, I think it's a good thing they're moving the budget early. Be prepared. That's the biggest thing, particularly in the House of Representatives. They have a wait time from the time you present the budget to the time you can pass it. In the Senate, they don't have the same rules. So it's always important for the House to move as fast as possible to get that budget at least out there and ready to go.
Well, I'm glad to hear Joanna McClinton say that she anticipates an on-time budget. I think Stan and I know we've had many times where we've been there and we said we anticipate an on-time budget, and then we would be standing there in the middle of July saying, any time now. But seriously, in an election year, I think they are focused on getting this thing done because everyone has to sort of get back to their districts and show everybody they're getting things done on time. But anything could happen. Last minute gridlock has happened in politics all the time. So we'll see. It could be suspenseful. It's hard to talk about Harrisburg and say, oh, it's exciting, it's suspenseful, but it could be.
Can you look at the dynamics of the two legislative caucuses and knowing what the governor has proposed, kind of anticipate what you see the big sticking points will be a few months down the road?
Right. So I think the big sticking points are already there, right? And it's the ancient philosophical argument between Republicans and Democrats. Democrats want to spend more, Republicans want to spend less. And so Governor Shapiro's budget increases spending by something like 5%, which is anathema to the Republican philosophy. But somewhere the two shall meet in compromise. That's the beauty of the system. And then there's this idea for legislative tricks, which I call them, are gimmicks, to potentially legalize recreational marijuana and use that revenue, or legalize and use that revenue, or it's already legal, games of chance, taxing them. But in both of those cases, I don't think that solves the big budget gap. And then the question is the rainy day fund. We have a sizable rainy day fund. The Democrats are always saying it's about to rain. It's raining now, and Republicans say it will be raining later, so we need to protect that. So it's that kind of stuff that's going on. And then when the heat's on, let's see how they get closer to each other.
Yeah, I mean, the problem that the state has right now has been the last three budgets have spent more money than they brought in, which means at some point you're going to have a tax increase. And right now, I'm betting, I'm not a betting man, but if I were betting, I bet on a tax increase next year, simply because you can't keep outspending what you're bringing in to the General Assembly. So I think the Senate and House leaders have a real tough decision in trying to come to a compromise this year, as the governor has said. The problem is the spend number. And any legislator who's been there a long time will look at what is next year's projection? Where are we going to be? Because I'm not going to make this vote if I have to know I'm going to have a tough vote next year. And I think I'm betting on an not on-time budget, simply because I think the gap is so wide. Now, I think it can get resolved sooner than it did last year. But somebody's got to make a major compromise, because I don't care who you're, Democrat or Republican. I can't believe there's any Democrat or Republican looking forward to voting for a tax increase, even though it's after this year's elections. So I think the question it comes down to is, what is that real spend number that they can come to that agrees that there's not going to be a tax increase, and where you can say, well, you know what, if we can avoid a tax increase next year, we believe the economy is going to grow at a system where we're now out of this funk of overspending our revenue.
Are there certain policies that jump out to you as potential areas of compromise, or perhaps to be used as bargaining chips?
I think the question, again, the governor mentioned marijuana and the skill games. I don't believe that the marijuana will pass at this point, because there's too much of a disagreement in how it should be managed. Whether they can come to that compromise, I don't know. I think the skills game is something that will get done, simply because at some point you have to start increasing your revenue somehow or another. But both of those are options that would be helpful to our budget, don't get me wrong. And this is coming from somebody who always opposed recreational marijuana in Pennsylvania. But at the same time, when the fan is running and you've got to come up with a way to solve this budget crunch, how do I bring in new revenue?
And I'm a Democrat, right? I'm a Democrat, and I'm going to say I hate the marijuana piece. I want to see less people smoking weed, not more. And I think it just opens the door to so many potential other health hazards, which is going to require more state revenue, mental health and treatment, and that kind of thing. And we already have a big problem with that. And then plus, I believe it's sort of selling our soul. And I think the people who really like the idea, I don't think are people who are really thinking about the issue of marijuana use. I think it's an idea that's been sold by folks that are privileged in society, that always have the inside track to get a casino license or to get some big tax break, and now are suddenly going to be the innovators in recreational marijuana. So I just see it's like another giveaway, which is not really going to benefit the state budget or taxpayers. So who knows what the gimmick is going to be that solves the problem? It's really, as Stan says, there's a long-term issue with funding government, and it needs to be solved.
And the governor hit the nail on the head. The healthcare problems that created, when I talked to Hershey's, their top people said to me, Stan, when you were in college, you could smoke marijuana anytime you wanted to and you wouldn't have any problems. But marijuana today is 35 times stronger than what it was when you were in college. So people my age who say, oh, well, you know, in college it was no problem. Well, when you look at Colorado and you look at their healthcare costs have dramatically, I actually believe recreational marijuana would be worse than smoking today because of the problem it's creating. And when I investigated Colorado, I seen the amount of DUIs increased. Yeah. Hospital admissions were amazing. So I think people need to do a better research before you legalize something in how you manage the cost. Because if you don't, all the money you bring in for marijuana, if you're going to spend it in healthcare, where are you benefiting from it?
Do you think that lawmakers are perhaps warming up to the idea of legal marijuana because medical marijuana is legal and then most of our surrounding states also have it legalized at this point?
Right. So we want to be a leader state, not a follower state, but at least in the initial phases, it creates more revenue doing this kind of thing. And I think what it is, it's symptomatic of looking desperately for new solutions. And I just think we have to be more creative than falling back on this as a solution, because it's going to be revealed in the next few years that the surrounding states that we have followed, as Stan said, the other health issues involved, it ends up costing more money than it's worth. So. One way or another, folks are going to have to join together and look at this thing realistically. And if it's a tax increase, you know, it's people are going to have to be mature if they decide that that's the thing to do, and not think about their political aspirations and how that's going to look if they vote in such a way. They've been brought here to do the people's work, and they need to do it.
Last week, the House passed a bill to increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour. How typically has the Republican caucus responded to this proposal, and perhaps what concerns have they had?
The biggest concern has been, as you've seen in other states, has been restaurants. The cost to go into a restaurant to get a burger and a French fries could be $20 just for a burger and fries. And when you look at families who are lower income, want to go out for $20 for a burger and a French fries and a soda is just really crazy. I think you have to look at where should we or why should we raise it. One, it should be phased in. It shouldn't be a jump, because small businesses are the ones who are going to get hurt the worst. Large corporations, they can manage the $15 an hour or $16 an hour. It's the small businessmen and women who will suffer from this. And many cases, you're going to lose jobs, because a small business is going to say, well, if I got to do this, how do I cut costs so that I'm not doing $20 burgers and French fries? And I mean, that's simplified. I don't mean to simplify it, but that's the problem. And a lot of companies, if you're in the construction industry, you're bringing somebody in, you're training them to go all the way up the ladder to running a bulldozer to whatever. Well, starting somebody who has no training at all, you want to keep them at a level where you can keep promoting their salary. I think we probably need to increase the minimum wage, but we've got to do it very carefully and methodically so that we don't hurt small business people, and we also don't hurt low-income families.
Right.
How do you determine what the appropriate rate should be?
Listen, that's another example of, it seems that this is the way we do it in state government. We look at the surrounding states and what they've done, and that they're in that ballpark, about $15. What studies have shown, whether you like it or not, is when you raise the minimum wage, it generally helps the economy. There is a push. Now, I agree with Stan that, like in certain situations with small businesses that are trying to stay alive month by month, paying an immediate $15 minimum wage would be an obstacle. So we have to figure out that way, how to scale that, or figure out if we're going to do it incrementally. But I definitely think it's a great idea. And so we look at how other states have done with it. From my own background, Francine, I told you before, my grandfather was a New Deal congressman who passed the first minimum wage. It was 25 cents back then. And people were like, 25 cents, are you crazy? So over the years, incrementally, we haven't gone all that far with inflation from that point in time. So we need to do better. And I do notice, and I I see that there are a number of Republicans who recognize this is something we should do, but we should do it the right way. I'm just happy that they passed a bill. Now let's go forward and make something happen so we can be just, and so that families that are on the edge don't completely fall into poverty. And that's what we're here for. America is the land of opportunity, not the land of poverty and failure.
I also think that this is an issue that Senate Republicans and Democrats in the House can negotiate through the budget process as well. This is one area where you can say, look, I don't want to spend this much money, but if I give you a minimum wage increase, can we do something here? So I think this is in the play of negotiating a budget where you say, okay, you want the minimum wage. If you think it's really important, then we have to adjust over here. Yeah. So I do think this is something that could happen this year.
Right.
Who are the minimum wage earners?
I mean, there are a variety of people. I mean, I was at McDonald's last night, and they have just renovated this McDonald's, and Stan's right about the amount of money that it costs to just get a quarter pounder with cheese and fries, which was delicious and heavenly. But the bottom line, there were 2 workers in there. Everything else is automated now. So basically where we're going with workers is that there's going to be less and less folks that are going to be minimum wage type workers, and they're going to be people probably on the outer edges, and statistics bear that many of them are women, and so with children. So a variety of jobs out there that could be diminishing in any event. Would pay the minimum wage. So that underlines a whole other issue of how we're going to get to the point of what's our economic future for people who are workers, and how AI is going to affect that. And the bottom line is the minimum wage is a Band-Aid here for a bigger picture of where the job's going to come from for people in the future.
The other thing is college kids. You know, growing up, I worked at Geno's then and in drive-ins. Worked over the years to raise money to go to college to help pay, because grew up in a low-income family. So when you eliminate jobs for these kids who are low income, who aren't going to get scholarships maybe, or who have to choose which college they go to based upon what they can afford, it makes it very difficult if you're eliminating these jobs for kids today. Like I said, I think as he talked about, it's women, and it's college kids or high school kids who are trying to earn some money to pay toward their college.
Yeah.
Being that some of these entry-level jobs now pay far beyond what the minimum wage is, does the minimum wage still matter?
I don't think it does, my personal opinion, simply because I see Rudders and Wawa and all of these guys are paying $15, $16 an hour, and if you're going into training, it could be as high as $18 to start. So I don't think it does as much. But I don't claim to be an authority on it. I just think today that if we let the economy grow, everybody's going to prosper. It's just, I hate to change this a little bit here, but for instance, when people want to tax business, anytime you want to tax business, it passed on through the product, whether it's a French fry and a burger, or it's a battery you buy for your car, or whatever it is. And so I think for Pennsylvania, we have to be looking at what other successes other states have had. You know, a lot of businesses have moved to North Carolina, South Carolina, so on and so forth. Let's look at what made them successful in attracting manufacturing or whatever jobs are out there, so that we can model some of those. Those are some of the things we can learn from it to help balance our budget.
Right. So it's great for kids to be able to get a decent wage doing summer jobs and that kind of thing, and still we have the economy where people say we're going to pay you under the table because you're just a summer worker and that kind of thing. So I think from the standpoint of politics, I think it's great for Governor Shapiro because just the general chorus in the Democratic world is, boy, that's a great idea, raise the minimum wage. So if he could carry that flag, that would be good for him politically, regardless of the economic effect. But we have a lot of issues like that where they make people feel good, but do they solve the problem? We need more mature people who are like ready to solve problems and stop playing games.
Let's shift our focus to mass transit funding for a moment. Governor Shapiro last year agreed to a 2-year plan providing for capital funds to address mass transit funding. He'd recently called on leaders to revisit that issue now as opposed to waiting another year. Do you think there's a political will to revisit that issue at this time?
Yes and no. I think it's something that's going to get some consideration. I think in light of the World Cup looming, I think public transit is going to be crucial to moving tourists from around the world, and then regular folks who are trying to get to jobs and do their business. Going back to the minimum wage, I mean, people have to take public transit just to be able to afford to live. And we've improved the quality. The price has been going up. It could go up again. Does it become prohibited after that? So I think if you're a mature state and you have you're trying to be a world destination in a lot of ways, where Pennsylvania could be with our big cities and all the cool things in between, we have to be invested in a well-funded transit system. It has to be well maintained, it has to be well managed, and it sure has to be safe. And all those things are going to be issues in doing it, but it's worthy of consideration. The bottom line is, will it take the back seat to other issues as the budget process goes forward?
Yeah, I mean, mass transit has always been one of those things controversial because it's on a regular need, and the governor's right. It's going to be important for the FIFA, if I said that correctly, as it comes to the United States. But the problem comes down to is if I'm a representative or a senator from an area, it may have some mass transit for senior citizens and so on and so forth. I'm more worried about highways. So as a legislator or senator who comes from an area that don't have a lot of mass transit, I'm saying, okay, if I'm going to give you this for mass transit, what am I getting in highway improvements? Right. And that's one of the problems now. And I think that's one of the areas where Pennsylvania has really overlooked is our infrastructure for years. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've tried to, don't get me wrong, Democrats and Republicans alike have tried to. Everybody's afraid to raise the gas tax. And I voted for every gas tax increase, I gotta be honest. Mm-hmm. Here's why. When you increase your infrastructure, improve your infrastructure, matter sewer, water, whatever it may be, you're going to create jobs, not just construction jobs, but industry, manufacturing is going to move in, and technology. The problem comes into is we never have made the major investment. When you look at our gas tax, everybody says, oh, it's so terrible. But guess what? You're actually only spending $300 a year on the average, maybe $350 if you travel a little bit more. But the truth is, if you're in Virginia, you're paying that gas tax in Virginia and a personal income tax on your car. So you have a $30,000 car, you're paying $1,400. So beside the gas tax, you're paying $1,400. There's nobody in Pennsylvania paying $1,400 plus the gas tax. And so we have to get serious in Pennsylvania how we're going to pay for highways. And what people forget is we're above the Mason-Dixon line, which means we freeze and thaw every winter 24 to 36 times. So if you bend a spoon 24 to 36 times, it breaks. And our highways we're in a bad spot as a location. The second most bridges in the country, second most highways in the country. So when you consider the weather and everything else, I think there needs to be a major investment in transit and highways. But that takes a huge sum of money and a commitment, and that's tough to do in the political world of today.
Well, I couldn't agree more, Stan. And it's such a realistic look at it because not only have we neglected the highways and the bridges, we've had catastrophes, borderline catastrophes happen with bridges collapsing on I-95 in Philadelphia and other places. And also the economic impact of folks know about our roads, so when industry thinks about where it wants to locate or where it wants to travel through interstate commerce, and they think about Pennsylvania in a negative light, it's going to affect the long-term economic development of the state. And then once again, we're back in this quandary where the tax is going to come. So sometimes you have to spend money to make money, and the gas tax is a very tough pull. It requires maturity to do it. They've done it in other states, but I think we deserve to have the best roads. We deserve to have our maintenance be prompt and our bridges not to be dangerous and falling on people's heads.
Yeah, when you look at just the bridge here on 83 in Harrisburg, $1.5 billion or more, could end up being $2 billion till the project is done. The bridge over 95 down in Philly is probably $20 billion to replace that at some point. Mm-hmm. So I think people have to look at what is the real cost of these infrastructure. We want better highways, but are we willing to pay for them? And that's where, it's very difficult because you as a politician are sitting there saying, gosh, I need new highways or better bridges in my district or more mass transit, but then I have to vote for a tax increase, or whether I'm going to tax Amazon packages, or what I'm going to tax. What am I going to tax to improve that infrastructure? And that's the challenge of the General Assembly and the governor today: is how are we going to solve that problem?
Let's talk about some of those specific proposals. Governor Shapiro had proposed using 1.75% of the sales tax toward mass transit funding. If you look to Philadelphia, Mayor Sherrill Parker had recently asked the governor for approval. She'd like to put a tax on rideshare fees. Do you have any sense of what is palatable to lawmakers at this time?
Well, I think for transit, I would say that the counties have to kick in some. There are some in the southeast, except I'm not an expert on that. But maybe more of an increase from the county governments who utilize that to support their mass transit. The state has to be fairly and also participating in that, and be fair and good partners. But again, the question comes down is how do you fund it with highways? So I'm not sure if the governor, but I think Wolf did propose taxing Amazon packages. There's a number of proposals out there. All of them require some kind of a charge. And of course, when people are up for election, they don't like doing that.
No. But there's new industries coming to the state, and we don't want to get the reputation for we'll bring you in and then we'll tax you. But there should be plenty of revenue to go along with other incentives that the state is offering with the data facilities for AI. And then just going back on the issue of transit and roads, we always have this division idea where folks who are in between the big cities think, well, we don't need public transit. Why we always have to fund big cities or metropolitan areas? And at the end of the day, one way or another, they will need it. And we go back to the revenue that comes in from having those great systems, and it all ties in together. So I think we need to figure out how to invest in our transit systems and our roads and basically our whole state economy.
I think because one of the problems I see in Harrisburg that's changed is every committee meeting today is in Harrisburg. Mm-hmm. We aren't getting legislators from Central PA into Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Erie, and we're not getting those legislators out into the rest of the rural Pennsylvania and suburban, because legislators aren't seeing the problems. And how do you solve a problem as a team? The way I look at the legislature, it's a team. How do we solve everybody's problems and get everybody becomes out a winner? And that you only get that by people understanding what the problems are. And I think the legislature needs to start having committee hearings, more of them. The policy committees, the Democrats and Republicans, they're traveling around the state. That's a little more political. What you need is the Transportation Committee. You need the different committees, health and welfare and so forth. The Education Committee, going and seeing daycares in Philly, or seeing them in Scranton, or seeing them in some rural area, so that they understand what they're dealing with in each part of the state. And when you have a better understanding of what your colleagues in the General Assembly face, easier to get a compromise.
Stan is too smart to not be in the legislature right now because we really need him. But I remember when I came in as a freshman senator, we had a lot of meetings in Philadelphia with legislators from rural areas just so that they could go around and say, this is where your investment dollar is going, the things that you're voting for or we ask you to vote for, this is what this is benefiting. And Stan is so correct. I mean, the last place you're going to learn stuff or be intellectually stimulated, all due respect, is in our state capitol, right? Having these boring hearings in hearing rooms. In the Capitol, you need to move around and get diverse points of view and meet different people and see where the dollar's going, ride subways and talk to transit police and so forth, and get out to construction sites. That's what I would like to see the legislature really do, is have many more mobile committee meetings and get out there and be with real live people and see what real live people think and feel.
Let's give our guests a quick break while we look at what's coming up on PCN. On the next PCN Capital Preview, we'll discuss the governor's economic policies. Megan Martin from the Commonwealth Foundation and Bernie Gallagher from the Keystone Research Center. They'll be here Tuesday morning live at 9 o'clock. Governor Josh Shapiro visits Erie to talk about his new memoir, Where We Keep the Light, Stories from a Life of Service. We'll have that for you on Tuesday live at 6 p.m. On the Issues continues our series with candidates running in the May primary. Carol Obando-Durstein, a Democrat running in Pennsylvania's District 7, joins us Wednesday at 7 p.m. Right after that, Justin Douglas, a Democrat running for Congress in Pennsylvania's District 10, joins us Wednesday at 7:30. We have a special college version of Journalists Roundtable this week. Reporters from the Daily Collegian at Penn State, the Pitt News at the University of Pittsburgh, and the Daily Pennsylvanian at the University of Pennsylvania join us on Thursday at 7 o'clock. On the history and culture side of things, PCN visits Venango County Historical Society, courtesy of America 250 PA. That's Tuesday at 8 o'clock. You can watch this show and all of our public affairs programming free of charge by visiting PCNselect.com. While you're there, you can download our streaming service, PCN Select. PCN is Everything Pennsylvania. We're a 501c3 nonprofit television network that relies on viewers like you. To make a donation, visit PCNtv.com. Let's get back into our discussion about the state budget. Now, since you've both served in the legislature in various roles, you've served under several administrations. Are there particular individuals, either governors or perhaps legislative leaders, that you think stand out as being particularly good negotiators, that were really good at getting things done?
Well, we were talking about this before we came on, that there were some really great leaders. For instance, Speaker Purcell, who was a Republican from my area, I thought was amazingly adept, could size up an issue and figure out where folks could compromise, and then he had sort of this steely personality to then get it done. And then one of my mentors is Vince Fumo, who was the appropriations chair, who was his whole career was essentially in the minority, but he always seemed to be a very crucial figure in all the budget process. But what they had in common is they could muscle up the votes on both sides of the aisle and solve problems and get folks to vote on things that they wouldn't think that they would vote on. And then Stan was saying how Governor Rendell is the kind of guy who he didn't care if you were Republican or Democrat. He always had the personal touch. And in a lot of ways, I was served in the Senate when he was there, and he would call folks, or he would go to see them, and he'd figure out a way to get folks to do what he would say is the right thing. So, and then I also know that he would also make a lot of promises to people, and then he'd say, "What? I forgot that one." No, I'm only kidding. But you have to have people who are really hands-on, and who don't live in an ivory tower, and who know how to speak to people and ask for help in every problem that we have in life, right? We have to ask for help if we're at a tough situation, and that's what I think great political leadership is about.
Yeah, I mean, I loved dealing with Governor Rendell when he was in office. I was the whip of the House at the time. You have to remind people that nobody comes out a loser in a budget negotiations. Simply because that's not the way the system works. Everybody's got to come out a winner. And I think when I look at people over the years, we talked about Purcell, Governor Rendell. I think Jay Costa, who's in the Senate, Democratic leader of the Senate, who again has been in the minority for quite a while. Jay's a great guy, and I think he has helped negotiate many a budget to solve problems that normally would have not got resolved. But he's learned how to work from the minority to get things done. And I think that's the key. Even when you're in the minorities, how do you work to get things done, whether you're a Republican or Democrat? And it's also important, if you're in the majority, to hear the minority and where and what can I do? Because I think, again, today, some of the problems is in this ideological world that we're in. Too many people on the left and the right don't want to go to dinner together. Yeah. When we were in the General Assembly, I would go out. Matt Bradford, who's the leader of the Democratic caucus in the House, he was my Democratic chairman of the Appropriations Committee. I was there. We would go out to dinner, and we'd have fun, and we'd pick on each other, but it was friendly. We could discuss issues where we knew we disagreed, but we also had a good time. It wasn't always about politics, and I think people forget that. You've got to make friends, people who you ideologically disagree with. And I think that's one of the problems we have in our country today is, oh, I can't be friends with you because you're a Democrat or you disagree with me on this issue. We've got to get back to saying, look, we respect everybody, and guess what? We're going to solve this problem. We're going to come down to where there is a solution that we can both agree to. We may not both be happy, but it's a solution.
Right, and I wanted to jump in too because I'll get in trouble with my friend Jay Costa, who I just saw last week. But the thing is too, he has an amazing ability to not get emotional or be offended. And in America today, in politics, everyone seems to like want to get offended quickly, and you have to go in the other direction to say, I don't want to be offended. I want to solve the problem instead. So Jay has that kind of demeanor. And then I also served with Dominic Pileggi, who I thought was not a flashy speaker. He was more of a quiet guy who was very shrewd and smart, and he was in the suburban areas of Philadelphia. So when I would meet with him, he'd say, Mike, I would love to negotiate with you, but we have these other crazy people on both sides of the aisle around us. But he was also a very skillful guy. And I think in Pennsylvania, we've had some amazingly talented people. And it's often unsung. It's a very tough job. And I think people are hard on legislators, but I do not think it's an easy life. I don't think it's an easy process. And but I'm glad we have good public servants.
Let's shift our focus briefly. I want to talk about education funding because in light of a Commonwealth Court decision a few years ago, the base education subsidy has been increasing. Do you think that's possible or realistic under our current fiscal constraints?
I don't think it needs to be a major increase right now. I think you have to make sure that the budget is sound, more important than anything else. Look, when I was chair of the Education Committee, and look, it's not always about how much money you spend, it's how you spend the money. And that's the real key. I mean, I met with the teachers in York City, for instance, who is one of the worst school districts in the state. And the teacher said to me, Stan, we're teaching, we get a grant to teach math this way. Partway through the year, we get another grant to teach math another way. So they're saying we're having problems. We're confusing the kids because we're constantly changing things in the middle of the year. And I think administrators have got to do a better job of looking how you solve it. I always say education is like a company, because it is. Your job is to educate children and get them for the real world. The problem is, if I'm president of Ford Motor Company or Chevy or whatever corporation out there, if I don't do a good job as president of that corporation, I'm fired. Superintendents need to be held accountable for test scores and everything else. Look, it's a tough job. Education, being a teacher is not easy in today's world, believe me. But the bottom line is somebody has to be held accountable. And I think superintendents who are supposed to be president of this corporation of education have got to do a better job of managing and working together as a team. Because if you're an administrator, you're a teacher, and you're a parent, it's a team to get those children educated. And our system is not working that way right now. It's superintendents blaming teachers or superintendents blaming parents. That's not team. It's how can we solve this problem? Where do we have a problem? Is it reading? Is it math? What do we need to do to improve this? And it's not easy. If you're in a city of Philadelphia or York, it's a lot different because you have more students who are speaking different languages, who don't have sometimes the pre-K or stuff that they need. So let's look at it holistically. How do we improve our school district? And too many are rather point fingers rather than pulling everybody together and say, we're going to work together as a team to solve this problem.
So Representative pointed out York, and then I've got Philadelphia. We've got Philadelphia, which it always turns into like a political football saying that Philadelphia has all these crazy problems in the school with crime and violence and dysfunction. But then you have kids that are just trying to learn, and you have schools within the public system that are elite, but they're not available to everybody. And we also have the charters where there's parts of that I like, where the money is more surgically expended, and the individual attention on students is better. I think I would like to see smaller classrooms and more individual attention, and more accountability on administration. So I think when you have a principal who's doing great with a school with a lot of challenges, they should get financial incentives, just like in business. And overall, I just think we need to get away from this big turf war where it's finger pointing, saying this system's sucking up all the money and it's terrible. And we need to find ways to achieve what we're trying to achieve, which is teach these young people and make sure that their future is bright and not bleak. And all these other problems that come from the system are through the failure of our ability to get them educated, get them motivated. But I don't want to say it's a survival of the fittest, but we definitely need more accountability of how the money is being spent. It should be spent in a quantifiable way, and it should be consistent. Like we're talking about, Stan was saying that the contrary grants, it's absurd, and that kind of thing shouldn't happen.
The other problem we have in our schools, when I went to Downtown High School, if you were great in math, you were with other students who were great in math. So the teacher wasn't teaching to the A students, the C students, and those below that. So how do you, as a teacher sitting in a classroom, teach to all these and all these special ed students that might be in your classroom who need additional help and assistance? So we're not making it easy on the teachers to teach. And it's the kids who are maybe A students aren't getting what they need. They're getting bored because the teacher has to somewhere teach in this middle. So we want to continue to be the greatest at creating scientists and technology. We have to be able to not be always politically correct. If you're great in math, you're here. And if you're in the average, you're in this group. So that the teacher can teach the students and their ability and bring them up to that level. But you can't if you're teaching to all levels in the same classroom at the same time. And it's not fair. And if you're, maybe you're not good in math, but you're good in English, so you're in a different category. We have to learn that you cannot put a mixture of people in one classroom and then say we're going to be able to teach them and make all of them be successful.
To what extent do you think what happens at the federal level will impact what happens in the state budget, particularly when we look at things like human service funding?
Well, I think I've been saying this for a long time when I was in the General Assembly. We'd have to really look at human services. I think the Pennsylvania Department of Human Services is too big for a person. Governor Stack could go in there today, and he could be a great manager, but when you're managing, 80,000 employees, so many different things, children and youth, senior citizens, and on, people who are on welfare or whatever, you can't manage something that big and make sure you're successful. I think that department needs to be broken up. Maybe some of the duties sent to the Department of Aging that deal with senior citizens. Maybe create a special department just for the children's issues. And then, of course, then you have the welfare or whatever you want to call it. Because we've had some great secretaries there. Don't get me wrong. But it's just too massive to solve the problems. We throw everything into welfare or human services, and then we expect that secretary to solve all our problems. And I think you're asking too much of a single secretary to do it. And they can't focus. They're constantly running to put out fires rather than moving the department forward.
Right, and how will human services be affected by the Fed? I think there's a lot of money that in federal funding is going to come from Congress, or it's not. I anticipate that it's not going to meet the budgetary requests in a lot of our problem areas, but also going to be boring again. I agree with Stan that it has become a behemoth. It's just the system is so big. You have talented people in that world that want to be social workers, that want to help people that are in challenged situations. And they just don't know where to start. There's just too much disorganization and too much bureaucracy. So we have to get so much smarter in that area. We have to decentralize and create sort of a more mobile, more sensible way of dealing with all the different social issues that are going on out there.
Yeah, the General Assembly, for instance, is dealing with this big department, trying to figure out where the problems are. Because the increases in the Department of Health and Human Services have been 9, 10, 11% every year. But you can't keep doing that. So I think breaking it up, giving every secretary an opportunity to be successful, and for our programs to be more successful is what we need to do.
That is all we have time for. Our guests
Wow.
have been former State Representative Stan Saylor and former Pennsylvania Lieutenant Governor Mike Stack. Gentlemen, thank you both for your time.
Thank you, Francine.
PCN recently spoke with Representative Kyle Mullins about his legislation regarding data centers.
Welcome to our program. You are sponsoring legislation involving data centers. What can you tell us about these bills?
Thanks, Ellen. Really appreciate the chance to come on your program. Data centers are something that is being discussed at dinner tables across Pennsylvania and across our country. They are things that are being emotionally debated at municipal meetings. And in my corner of the world, in Lackawanna County in particular, it is a very hot topic. So We understand how fast-paced, how fast-moving this industry is, and would like to set up here in Pennsylvania. You know, we've got to put our residents and our ratepayers and our environment and our communities first. And if these entities, these large corporations, want to come and avail themselves of our land, of our resources like water and power, we need to put in place some guardrails to hold them to account, to make sure that they are the responsible and responsive neighbors that they claim to be. So in general terms, there are a couple of bills moving by, one introduced by State Representative Kyle Donahue, the other Kyle from Lackawanna County, representing the 113th District, and myself, I represent the 112th. And my bill would require transparency. I think too many people feel as if these developments are coming without having much knowledge. So much is shielded by non-disclosure agreements when it comes to the development and courting of an end user. But again, if this industry wants to be able to tap into our water sources to join our electricity grid, we should absolutely, as the public, have insight into just how much water and power they plan to use. State Rep Kyle Donahue's bill that moved in tandem with mine a few weeks ago in the State House would set up a process to create a model ordinance. I mentioned how quickly this industry is moving, and so many municipalities are caught unprepared or at least ill-prepared as far as their zoning ordinances go, because these are, especially these new hyperscale massive data centers are unlike any previous industrial development. So this would create a process by which a model ordinance is adopted and is then an option to any municipality out there that would like to implement it. We aren't experts. We don't know the right answer of how close is too close to residential development. We don't know the full answer of what's an appropriate or max amount of gallonage of water use per day by these. But this process, that piece of legislation, would involve experts and environmental experts and community leaders who will be able to give that necessary input to make sure that we are offering a model, a template for municipalities to adopt and protect their communities.
What have you heard from these community members or environmentalists about these pieces of legislation?
Sure. It's with my bill, I think it has the transparency, doing the more you do in daylight, the better when it comes to governance or, business development, industrial expansion. Openness and transparency is the best policy. So there's a lot of, I've felt and heard a lot of support for these measures. And for Representative Donahue's bill establishing the model ordinance, a great number of environmental advocacy groups have been strongly supporting that bill as well. There was some concern that about where in statute it belongs, and we needed to also reiterate via an amendment, a change to the bill in committee, that it is in fact optional, that this is not the state with a heavy hand forcing any rule on a municipality. We in Pennsylvania, we are a commonwealth and must always respect the local control that is enshrined in our founding, in our bones as Pennsylvanians. And so I think that bill strikes the right balance.
Lastly, where are these bills in the legislative process currently?
Sure. Those two pieces of legislation were reported out of the Energy Committee on a partisan vote, partisan split. So they are up for consideration, hopefully soon by the full House of Representatives, at which point they would then go over to the Senate, and we'll do all we can to get the votes over there. There are a number of other measures that are in development that are working their way through the legislative process that would establish minimum host community fees. Again, if you want to be good corporate citizens, and only if you are approved to come to one or a number of our areas or municipalities across the state, you should pay your fair share for the impact that you will inevitably have, and for the trust and welcome and services of that municipality. So making sure that it is well known by the industry that we have a baseline standard for, if you're going to be a certain size of data center, here's what you have to kick in to support your surrounding communities. We also have an EMS, emergency services bill that would require coordination and funding of those efforts. If these massive industrial complexes are coming to our towns, we need to make sure that first responders have the necessary equipment and manpower to respond to any emergencies on site. Also, one last thing worth mentioning, there are a number of ratepayer protections to ensure that ratepayers are not footing the bill for data center build out or expansion or infrastructure. And one of the things we already passed into law this past budget was requiring accurate load forecasting to make sure that speculative data center developers aren't artificially driving up or inflating the expected demand or pull of energy. That was passed into law. It was something I worked on very hard with other state reps in this process. We just need the other states and the overseer of our local energy grid, PJM, to adopt something similar to make sure that we aren't paying for data center development in Virginia or other states.
Representative Kyle Mullins, thank you for joining us.
I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
That concludes today's show. Join us for tomorrow's episode of the PCN Capital Preview. Megan Martin from the Commonwealth Foundation and Bernie Gallagher from the Keystone Research Center will be here to discuss the governor's economic policies. That's tomorrow morning live at 9 a.m. I'm Francine Schertzer. Thank you for watching.